So glad to see all of you here today, especially Shanna. She may or may not choose to explain that comment.
Yes.
Anyway, we're here for the Odyssey, and I'm going to review the protocol because most of you know it, but it helps to review. Shanna is going to tell her story for 30 to 40 minutes, whatever. And when she comes to a stopping place, we also will stop and take a breath and just take a few minutes to relax. During that time, or after that time, I should say, we'll take up an offering. And then I'll pass around the microphone if people have questions, because we are, in fact, recording. So we like to get both the question and the answer recorded. Jana does not need answer any questions that she doesn't want to. All right. And without further ado,
All right. So just tell my story. Um, like mostly along the spiritual line. Okay. So I guess my story begins. I was born into a very religious home, a very staunch Mormon religious home, and like from pioneer stock. And that was like part of our whole legacy, right? And I was born in Utah. And so I was very much surrounded in a social, cultural way as well. And then we moved to Virginia when I was 7. And so we were still very much Mormon, but I was surrounded by all different, Bible Belt community. And so it felt like church was something that we did on the weekend, and then I would just go about my day. And I I remember I didn't really think about it much until I started to become, probably like hit puberty and started really questioning what it meant to be a woman in the world. And this very patriarch heavy religious community that I was in, I sort of started going, wait a minute, wait a minute. Also, the whole idea of perfection was really stressed growing up, and becoming perfect so that you would then become a god yourself was the whole idea. If you're not familiar with Mormonism, basically the idea is you're here earning points, becoming perfect, and then when you die you'll either be in the telestial, terrestrial, or celestial like, I don't know, like, kingdoms. And the goal is to be the most perfect and end up in the celestial, and then you become a god yourself, and you get to create planets and do this whole thing. So a lot of people were excited about that, but I remember laying awake at night, feeling the pressure of one day running my own planet, and the idea of living an eternity as the head honcho, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I think I was maybe 8 years old, sitting in Sunday school, going, "I think the telestial kingdom is going to be just fine." I really do, because I also had been told that the people in the celestial kingdom could come down and visit. So I was like, "Well, then they can come see me, and I can roll with my homies and just be chill." So that was kind of where I was at, but I hadn't fully like rejected the idea of the church yet. And then I remember being like 13, and at this age we separate the boys and the girls,
mm,
and I was in young women's is what it was called. So everyone would go to sacrament meeting together, take the sacrament, listen to the speaker, and then we would separate for the next 2 hours. 3 hours of church. 3 hours. It felt
ugh,
like a lot. And so I was with the other girls, and we were talking about our futures, and they said we're going to make a list of all the qualities we want in our future husbands. And I immediately was like, why aren't we making a list of all the qualities we want to call, of ourselves, like what am I working towards for me? So anyway, I start writing things down, and I was obsessed with the Beatles at the time, and I was like, has to have a British accent, plays you know plays the guitar, makes me laugh. And then at the very end I was like, it could take me to the temple someday, you know? And so then, and I thought the whole thing was weird anyway, but the girls start standing up and they're like, first things first, he can take me to the temple and he's a good patriarch for our family. And I was like, shit, I am not making the right list for this activity. My priorities are all out of whack. And so that was kind of the beginning of the end for me. I was just like, I don't. I don't dig this. It doesn't feel right to me. I don't feel like I'm encouraged to have a personal relationship with God, or I'm not cultivating my own, inner world. And anytime you ask questions, it was just, please rely on your faith and stop asking questions. In fact, I remember having my hand up many times and they would just, anyone? Okay, great. No.
Ah.
And getting in arguments with the teachers, and so by the time I went off to college, that was like it. And I stopped going to church, and then I started kind of looking for anything, because I missed the community of it, and I'm also a very artistic, emotional person, so I missed the spiritual nature and having that touchstone.
Mm.
And so then it became yoga. And I started to, back then the internet was brand new, so I was relying on library books, and it was mostly these old Indian men like in crazy contorted things. And I
Yes.
figure eight, we fold the leg above the head, and and that's kind of how I got into it. But I really loved the meditation. I loved connecting to breath, which also resonated to me as a singer. I also have pretty severe OCD, uh, in the form of intrusive harm thoughts. And so, I'm like gonna loop back around. When I was in hitting puberty, that started to happen. And so I would have these intrusive harm thoughts, and I thought I was losing my mind. But I was afraid to tell anyone because of the church. I thought they would, because your thoughts are something you're supposed to be able to control. So having a sinful thought or a bad thought is enough that you would need to repent and da, 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 da. So I was afraid to tell anyone. So I was also very alone in that, and almost suicidal at one point because I couldn't control my thoughts, it felt like, and they were dark thoughts and bad thoughts, but I didn't dare tell anyone. So anyway, in college, I found out that what I had was OCD, and I started seeing therapists and stuff like that. So that was also a big sort of spiritual religious relief.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, you can't control thoughts, just come, and God doesn't care about your thoughts. If there even is a God, like that should not be something you're punished for. I feel like I'm sort of rambling, but it's sort of
No,
all part of
no.
the picture. And so then therapy became a sort of spiritual release or place where I could learn about myself, and a power, I guess, kind of a power that I could believe in. This idea of, you know, understanding my mind and having tools to deal with what was happening in my mind. So then it was, I'd go and I would practice yoga and I would breathe and I would meditate and I would see my therapist and I would get these tools on how to create a better version of what was happening inside of me and deal with what was happening inside of me. And then in college, maybe I did quite a few drugs, psychedelics and such. And so that sort of opened up even more, like, I think we're all just part of this one big thing, man. And exactly. I was in the yard, the tree started talking, and I think we're all part of the same thing, man. Yeah, and so, yeah, it just kind of all happened together, the yoga, the therapy, the psychedelics, and then eventually I, landed in Kansas City, and Anthony Edwards, was the music director of a play I was doing at the time, and he said, "Would you be interested in regularly singing at my church?" And I said, "I'm so sorry, but absolutely not." Uh I've been exercising the Mormon within for a long time, and I think I'd be very triggered to be inside of a church. And he was like, "No, no, it's not like that. They don't even like Jesus there. It's totally fine." And And so I was like, oh, I got to check this out. And so I came here and I started singing with the beautiful people in the choir and immediately felt at home and just like, well, this is it, man. Like, here are all these wonderful, zany, strange, educated, loving people all coming from their own experiences and allowing space and holding space for anyone and everyone. I just had never seen anything like it. And so then eventually I talked my husband into coming, and he is also a recovered Mormon, but his story is even more traumatic than mine. He served a mission
Mm,
and had a true like crisis of faith when he was in his 30s and ended up in a hospital for a little while actually because it just untangling the programming was
mhm,
just so intense for him, and especially being a white man who, I mean, I thought I had pressure running my own planet. Like, you know, he holds the priesthood, and
mhm,
we believe that the men, or I don't anymore, but they believe that the men hold all the power. So he is the channel for God, and I would have to come to him to get my access to God, right? So he's like the portal to God. So that was a lot. But
mhm,
anyway, I got him to come, and the first few times he came, he just sat and cried. I think just for all kinds of reasons, right?
mhm, mhm.
But now he loves it here too. And then my son, the way everyone has embraced him, like this is, I truly feel like this is what spirituality and community should be. And I'm so, so, so grateful that I found my way here.
Mhm.
It has meant so much to me and my family, honestly. And it's been this community has allowed my husband and I to heal so much from the way we were raised, and given us permission to create our own pathway to spirituality. So that's kind of it in a scattered nutshell. Yeah.
It's absolutely wonderful. Okay. Let's
Yeah.
thank Shanna for sharing her story. I love it. Okay, and let's just take a minute to breathe. Okay. And like I say, I will, if you have a question, please raise your hand. I'll bring you the microphone and we'll get to the bottom of this whole running a planet thing. Oh my gosh. Well, I will take moderator's privilege and share with you one of the quotes from my sisters that I shared at my Odyssey, which was a couple of weeks ago, which was, I've seen God's job and I don't want it.
Yes. Amen to that.
So, oh yes.
Good morning, Shanna.
Good morning.
I love you.
Love you too.
But I do have a question. My question is, it's interesting these religions like Scientology and Mormonism now that I found with this running the planet thing, and also they're similar because they don't believe in psychiatry or helping with thoughts.
Right.
I wondered, did your therapist really were you kind of deprogrammed? Was it like a kind of deprogramming?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I I really had to like come to terms with the idea that I wasn't like choosing my thoughts off a shelf, and that those thoughts weren't a direct reflection of who I am in the world, right? Because they in that religious community, it really is like you choose your thought, and that thought defines you, and that thought directs your every action. And so with a intrusive harm thought, I mean, just like anything, like an intrusive thought, when you're standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon and you go, oh, what if I jumped? You're not going to jump. You're like, well, that was a crazy thought. But someone with OCD is going to then have a violent inward action, a reaction of like, oh my God, I'm going to jump off. I'm going to jump off. I'm going to jump off. I need to run to my car before I jump off. I don't trust myself not to jump off. And so, um, eh, eh, yeah, I thought I was sort of inherently evil for having the kind of thoughts I was having, and it took a long time for me to like trust the therapist in that these thoughts were just my brain. She was like, basically, it's like at the end of the week when you take your kitchen garbage and dump it into the big garbage. It's just all the random stuff that your brain's been collecting at various times, and it's just like dumping it out on you all day. And sometimes it's like, watermelon, other times it's jump off the cliff, and that's I need to go to the doctor. Like they're just coming at you. And so yeah, it did take a lot of time and deprogramming that was not something my spirit was choosing as a person. And this, yeah, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Uh, but how did you become a singer?
Well, church. My mom loves to sing. Actually, it's a really big thing in the Mormon culture to sing. There's lots of singing and programs, and they love the arts. All the children normally play instruments, and they, perform a lot. Like that's a big deal. And so when I was 3, my mom noticed that I could carry a melody, and then she would start to harmonize with me, and I could hold my own. And so she said by the time I was, 4 and 5, she would be playing the piano, and I, could just sing. And she had never heard a little kid sing like that. And so she decided I should start singing in church. And so she would book me um, for the sacrament meeting. But the problem was, again, I have anxiety disorders and have since I was little. And so I would get up there and be consumed with terror, and I would just cry. Sometimes I'd sing, the most of the time I would just cry. And she never knew which I would do. So she just kept putting me up there. And again, that was something I had to work on with a therapist later in life. I still deal with very, like, almost crippling stage fright, but I have tools and I meditate and I do things because I do love to sing. I love to sing, and I especially love singing in choirs and groups and ensembles. That's why theater became my path, because then I didn't have to be alone. I was with a group of people and we were doing it together, and that helps with the fear. But even now, when I have to sing in church for you guys today, in fact, I am very scared. Yeah, yeah. So, but it all began in church. Yeah. What I would like to add to one of the reasons why I kept going with it was because my mom was, God gave you this gift. It didn't come from you. And so you need to share it. And for years, that was why I did it, because I felt an obligation. And then again, through therapy, I learned about growth mindset, and that you have a skill and you work on it. It's not given to you by God and then you have to devote it to God. You can choose whether or not you want to sing. So yeah, I had to kind of release myself of that obligation as well. Yeah.
It's gonna be such a stereotypical question coming from me, but what got you into theater and what have you done over the course of your life?
Oh, well, so as I said, my show mom was pushing me out on the church stage, and she decided, or she heard about the community theater in town was doing Oliver, and they needed kids. And so I practiced "Where is Love," and I got my audition, and they put me in the room to audition, and my mom was sitting there and the directors were behind the table, and the music started and I just started sobbing because I was terrified. And turns out they really needed kids, so they cast me anyway. So I was a warm body, and that's all they needed apparently. So I was one of Fagan's kids, and that's when I realized you didn't have to do it alone because Fagan's kids, we moved in a gang, and so then I started to relax and really love it. So I did that show, and then the next year I tried out for Fiddler on the Roof, and I was Sprinza the fourth daughter, and I didn't get to sing Matchmaker, which really was sad, but I did it anyway. And then when I was a freshman in high school, we moved from Virginia back to Utah. And even though I was a Mormon, I hadn't been raised in that like deeply entrenched culture. And I was like this weird hippie girl. Like I had made my own bell bottoms. I had like put the fabric in all my jeans to like make them bell bottoms. And I had crazy frizzy hair. And these people truly looked like children of the corn. Everyone was blonde. Everyone had blue eyes. And the girls had nails. And I just like stood out like you could not believe. So in order to make friends, I auditioned for Cinderella and I got the role of the ugly stepsister, which felt really right at the time. And when I was on stage, people would laugh. And that was really what did it. Because then it wasn't about my singing, it was about ba-da-da-da. And I fell in love with theater. And so then that became it. So in high school, I did every single play. And then I got a theater scholarship to SUU, which is the home of the Utah Shakespearean Festival. And then I started working for the Utah Shakespearean Festival, and I did a tour of Romeo and Juliet, and it just sort of cascaded from there. I did the regional premiere of Les Mis, and I did it with all these people who had been on Broadway. And I was like, "Whoa!" And, I remember the woman who played Madame Thenardier had done like 10 Broadway shows, and she kept this huge bottle of whiskey in her drawer. And she would drink from it during the show. And I was like, oh my gosh, because, no one drank alcohol in my community. I was like, what is happening? Is this what it means to be an actress? Um, which I later was happy to do as well. So, um, yeah, but I just kept auditioning for everything I possibly could, and I did a bunch of community theater, and then I got my equity card, and then I was in New York, and I was doing it, and Eric Rosen, who was the artistic director of the Rep at the time, brought me out here to do Santaland Diaries, yeah, because he had a vision of it where there was like a music running through the whole thing. And so I played all these different instruments and sang, and I had never been to Kansas City. And I got to know some of the other actors and got to like see other shows. And I was amazed that there was so much theater here. And it was this idea of you could be a full-time actor, but also have a house and 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 dogs and a car because I was like paying 4,000 a month in rent, living with five other people in a two-bedroom apartment. It was like New York had gotten really rough, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I moved here. Everyone's like, "You're what?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm going to Kansas City." Yeah, it's been wonderful. So I think I would say every actor has their own completely different journey. And it really is about finding the work-life balance. Like, do you want to be in a community where you can have a full life, or do you want to just like be in there with the best of the best in a market like New York and just da, 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 or back and forth. Like, yeah, that's my journey, but it's kind of different for everybody. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. This is delightful. I love hearing your journey. There's so many twists and turns to it, and steps that you took, and surprises along the way. What my orientation is family systems. And you came out of an embedded culture that was full of really beliefs that weren't supportive to and nurturing to your growth as an adult, a fully flourishing adult.
Yeah.
How did you reconcile your connection with your family of origin, who's probably continuing in that mainstream culture of Mormonism? And I know you have an alternate culture and family that loves you dearly and that you love dearly. How do you reconcile those two worlds? And Are you scapegoated by your family of origin, or is there love there in terms of you have a place at the table too, or do they not put a plate on the table for you?
Oh, yeah. It's a good question. Yeah. Um, for a while, so I've always been the black sheep, really. I should say. My father, also, I believe, had perhaps bipolar and definitely OCD, but undiagnosed. And so he would use alcohol to deal with that, and which quickly turned into alcoholism. And he sort of pulled away from the church and our family and everything. My parents stayed married and he was living in the house, but he was very abusive and very reclusive. And so he sort of held he was the true black sheep of the family, but everybody else is very devout to this day. But he was so dysfunctional and abusive that that sort of became like that's what happens when you don't practice the church teachings. And dad started drinking alcohol. So when you don't live the word of wisdom, that's what happens. And so then when I pulled away from the church when I went off to college, it was my mom was so afraid I would become my father. And you not going to church means you will end up destroying your life and the life of everyone in our family. So I couldn't really have any kind of conversation with her about what my true experience was and what I was trying to do. So we became estranged essentially. And I went off to New York for almost 7 years and we really didn't communicate. There was once I paid for her, I bought her a plane ticket with what little money I had because I was just so desperate for her to see what I was doing. And I flew her out and she came out for a weekend. And I could tell she was trying, but she didn't really understand, and it was very intense for her. And so that was it. And then I had some relationship with my sister, but she was very Mormon and 9 years younger than me. So she's always been very sweet to me, but there was not much understanding. And I remember her once being like, "If we weren't sisters, do you think we would even be friends?" And I was like, "I don't know that we would." And it was we both cried and it was kind of sad, you know. Um, she was never like mean though, not in the way my mom was like, "I just don't get you and you're ruining your life," you know. And then I also have a brother who is very sweet, but we just don't connect easily. And then as far as extended family, super no connection. They're just like very different than me and they don't care to know more, you know. um so then when I moved to Kansas City, I had stuff on Facebook about the production of Hair that I was doing, and my mom called and said, crying, "I see that you're doing all these wonderful things with your life and I'm not a part of it and I want to be." So she came to see Hair, and then we spent the whole weekend talking about it all. And it was really amazing that the Hair sort of opened it up for us. It was like, this is the dawning, you know, like it was wild. And so and that began a very long, we're still working at it, but now she comes and visits me for a month at a time. And we just have this silent dance, this unspoken, we just don't talk about church. We just don't talk about politics. And we find the places where we know we can safely enjoy each other. And I used to feel like I was only showing her a portion of myself, but now through therapy, I I remember once just going off on my mom, and my therapist was like, "Have you ever considered that you're not the daughter she expected?" And I was like, "What?" You know? So so I try to hold that in my mind, like, now being a mother myself, like, what if some child came out of me loving Trump? I would be like, "Ah," you know, I would be horrified. And essentially that's what I did to my mother. But the exact opposite. So yeah, so I try to give her a lot of grace, and she gives me grace, and my siblings and I feel more comfortable. It's sort of, from the matriarch, it has trickled down, and we all have a way of being together now. Feels good. Yeah, but it was a long journey. Yeah.
My question is kind of twofold in a way. So you have obviously the ability or the whatever it is, you can question. I mean, you of all in your family questioned, and your siblings and your mother and did not.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you have any insight into what was it about you that allowed you or opened you to be able to question. And the other thing then is, was that part of what opened you to those thoughts that you had that were sort of maybe out of control with or whatever?
Yeah, yeah. My um my husband has often said your imagination is the most incredible and the most horrible part of, that you have to deal with. And it's been that way since I was teeny. Like I do have a very open and imaginative mind, and I'm also an empath. So there would be, times as a little kid, like I could walk into a room and like really feel the vibe and be seriously affected by it. Whereas my mom would be like, beep, pop, boop, everything's fine. So I think that quality in me to like have a very open, imaginative mind and a very sensitive, empathic like soul is what makes me a great artist. But it 100% is what makes it hard for me to live in the world. Like it definitely is like why I'm so much anxiety, why the OCD thoughts can hold on to me because I'm so like susceptible and open to ideas and thoughts. If that makes sense, if maybe that's answering your question. Yeah.
Did Caitlin influence you to maybe think out of the box?
No, no, no one in my life was about that. They were all so like, and I remember my mom being like, "Why do you have to try these things out? Why can't you just listen to me and I'll tell you what is she so many times. Why do you have to go and try it?" And I'd be like, "'Cause I'm living, I want to live." And my son is the same way. He takes apart his toys and he asks why about everything and he wants to know how things work. And I see him and I'm like, whoa, wow, that must have been how I was. And he's also very afraid of everything. It's like this strange mixture of I am terrified of everything, but then I'm also like, but I will do it anyway. So I'm just white knuckling it through life like just really fully like um yeah, but it just is like who I am because no one was, and in fact I was told, you're Shanna, you're so weird, stop it. Why are you saying that? Why are you thinking about that? That's so weird. And I thought I was truly a weird person and ill-fitting and like bogus because everyone around me was like, why are you even asking that? Why are you thinking that? Why are you doing that? And for me, I was like, because I don't know, I just want to try it out. Why we're here to do that, right? So that's yeah.
Um, you don't have to answer this, but do you think maybe you're more like your father and he wasn't able to break free because of his raising?
Yes. That was like 5 months of therapy right there, that question. Um, yeah, I remember the day that my therapist was like, "So do you think you would quit?" Because my father was an artist and he did engraving and drawing and he built a black powder rifles. He like from a big piece of wood would carve it all out and like create these beautiful black powder rifles that would have been used in like the 1700s. So for him, there were more like these art pieces, collector's items. And I realized there was a time where I was sort of self-sabotaging all of my artistic endeavors because I was going, "Oh, I'm like my dad. I'm the artist. I'm crazy. I'm dysfunctional. And so I'm going to end up like him." And then through therapy, I was able to kind of see that as a positive and then have sympathy for my father who didn't have the resources I had and who felt very much alone. And I used to be very angry at him but then it sort of switched to I was angry at my mom for keeping us in that toxic environment. And now it's finally, you were doing your best. You were doing your best. And I really wish that my father would have had a community that would have given him the resources like I did, because I think he would have led a completely different life if he could have gotten the help he needed. And I think we are so similar, so similar. And unfortunately, we were never able to come together and share in those things because he was so walled off and I didn't understand enough. He passed away. I didn't understand enough before he died. But I think it would have been really great for both of us to be like, me too, but he never got to have that. Yeah. And I only, yeah, I forgive him for everything and then just feel really sad that he didn't have that. Yeah.
Do you find it difficult to address the idea that the people who believe in the absurd are supposedly the normal, and that your inability to believe in the absurd made you the sort of stereotyped abnormal?
Right. Yeah, yeah. So like um yeah, like so you're saying that these people that were so ready to invest in like the Mormon culture were actually the ones that were cuckoo. Is that what you're saying or
I think it's larger than that in the Trumpism.
Ah, yeah, I do kind of feel mad now that I'm a grown up and I have more perspective and I live in a larger community. I'm like, I wasn't the crazy one after all. You guys are the ones wearing the weird underwear, going to a temple and baptizing the dead. So maybe we need to revisit some of those assessments. I do feel a little like, okay, wait. Yeah, yeah.
I wonder if you'd share with us, Shauna, about meeting your husband, if that was here in Kansas City, and the fact that you had such different backgrounds, but similar backgrounds. You had the faith in common, different routes to adulthood, why that has, how that's come together now, and what that means in terms of how you're parenting your own children.
Yeah. Well, I would like to say right off the bat that Zach and I talk a lot about how we are parenting ourselves while we parent our children. Like, I don't know if you guys have heard of that concept before. I'm sure many of you have. They're like, oh, not only am I raising Jude the way I want him to be, but that's how I wish I would have been raised, and kind of like raising my inner child with Jude at the same time. We both do that. And we try to be very conscious of our, because we still have so much to deprogram, and he especially will be like, oh my gosh, I just said that to him because that's what I was raised to do, and I don't even believe in that anymore. Oh my gosh. So yeah, we do talk a lot about how we're parenting the kids and how our backgrounds need to like be detangled in order to parent them the way we want. But um I met my husband on the day of my divorce hearing, which was pretty hilarious. My friend was coming with me to my divorce hearing because I was married to a woman before. We were married when I moved to Kansas City, and she had a horrible experience leaving New York and decided she didn't want to be with me anymore. And so she one morning was like, I'm going back to New York. And so I was just, okay. Um, and so then I took 2 years where I just didn't see anyone or date anyone. And then I decided, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready. The divorce hearing's about to happen. I think I want to start dating again. So my best friend took me to brunch to celebrate the divorce hearing. And I walked into the restaurant, and this like handsome guy was standing there, and he goes, Shanna Jones? And I was like, I didn't know who he was. And he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I just saw you in a play and I thought you were really great. And come sit in my section. I'll be your server. And so he was our server, and he gave me his number, and he was like, yeah, I'm an actor too. And so we should get coffee. And I was like, great. And so then we got coffee at Heirloom, and we sat there and talked for 4 hours, and finally they closed Heirloom down. And they were like, "You guys got to get out of here." And it felt like no time. It was like from a rom-com. It was so great. Um, and we just immediately just fell in love, just like crazy love, like ridiculous. And we found out that my drama teacher in high school left, and she was a huge influence on me, and went to a different high school, and it was his high school in Utah, 2 hours away. And she was the one that convinced him to start doing theater. And so she set us both on our little paths. And then we went to the same university at the same time. But I was in there was like the actor training program and then the larger theater studies program. So I was in the conservatory and he was in theater studies. And we had all the same friends, but we never met. And then he married someone shortly thereafter, and I moved to New York and they moved to Pennsylvania. And then almost the exact same time I moved to Kansas City, he and his ex-wife moved to Lawrence. And so it's like we had been kind of dancing around each other for our whole adult lives. And then literally the day my divorce was finally met. So we joke that like we've been meaning to be together all this time. We just had to do work on ourselves before we could meet up. So yeah, and it's been so important that we come from the same background because it's so intense. I That was something I had a hard time. Remember one time I got in a fight with my wife and she goes, "Well, you passive aggressive Mormon." And she just truly didn't understand so much of me because how could she? She didn't have that experience, and it really is like in every part of us. And so for he and I to have that thing in common is really important in understanding each other and our baggage. Um, and yeah, and so now we're together and I'm very grateful, and he's an incredible partner. And he has two children from his previous marriage, Wyeth and Blythe. And we had such a good time raising them that I was like, let's have another one. And he was like, no. And then he was like, okay. So then we had Jude, and then we've most recently had Bridget, and I love my family so much. So Zach and those kids are the greatest joy of my life, and they have healed me so much. It really is incredible. I'm a much more sane and grounded person because I have this family. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Shannon. It's me again.
Hey, you again.
I have a question for you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but one of my one of my favorite shows is the Book of Mormon. And I'm wondering how you received that and how Salt Lake City received that. Like the Mormon community. Was it received well or poorly?
Here's the funny thing about Mormons. They love anything about them, good press or bad. They really do. They love. Did you know that Steve Young was a Mormon? Did you know that so-so is a Mormon? Like they love that. So there's actually quite a lot of Mormons who like the play, but they're so entrenched in their own dogma that they don't even get that it's making fun of them. Like truly, my mom has heard songs from the play and it's like, that's so funny. And she doesn't get it, which is kind of great. I'm like, fine, that's good. When I saw it, it was the most cathartic experience of my life. And I'm sure people who were sitting near me thought I was insane because when the coffee cups came dancing out, I was like, ah, yes! I mean, just like that loud. I love that show. It was so cathartic. The turn it off. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. Like yeah. And so Utah's very interesting that all the people in sort of the alternative lifestyle are in Salt Lake. And so it was huge in Salt Lake. And then everybody else who is very much Mormon and into the culture stays in the other towns and cities. But everyone who's trying to kind of break free goes to Salt Lake City. And it's a very divided situation, or Park City, which is still sort of part of Salt Lake City. But yeah, yeah. So if you live in Salt Lake City, you can have a pretty diverse and normal experience. But outside of Salt Lake City, it's yeah, all the mo's. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was moderating another Odyssey of a recovering Mormon, actually a recovering Mormon family. It was a couple. And one of the things the woman said, which was her turning point, and she was very young, I think 12 or 13, when she was told, and your thoughts is what brought this up. She was told that the reason she had to dress modestly was so that she wouldn't be responsible for boys having lustful thoughts about her. So let's back this, let's take this apart. Her behavior was the reason that they would have these thoughts. So she was responsible for whether or not they reached salvation. And that was such an absurd burden for her. The planet, she never got to the planets. That was enough, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was very, very difficult because that is a 12, 13-year-old girl living in the culture. They lived in Utah. No, excuse me, Idaho, but same
Same
difference.
thing.
Same difference. I beg your pardon, but yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I'm really curious about, and this you may not be able to answer even, but knowing that your thoughts are just waves on a beach. You know, they'll come, they'll go. It's like emotions. You're not necessarily responsible for them. You are responsible for your response to them.
Yes.
But letting go of the idea of control is how can of your thoughts, the control of your thoughts. How do you do that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I've for me and my journey, I've got lots of little tools and sayings and things that my therapist has given me. One really great one was like, your mind is a party, and the intrusive thought comes in as this guest that's like very foul. Like this nobody wants to be around this foul guest, but you're going to just allow that guest to be here, and you get to choose whether or not you want to engage with the guest. Maybe you take him a drink and you say, I acknowledge that you're here, but I'm going to have my party. And so that's really helped, because a lot of times too, like, that whole idea of like, don't think of a pink elephant. Well, now I'm really thinking of it. So it's like acknowledging it and letting it be there, but just not engaging with it has been very helpful. Yeah, or just like that idea of like, oh, I'm responsible for their sexual acts because I wore a tank top today. Like, that's not my journey. Sorry, it's not my journey. Not my journey. Is another thing that she's told me to say many times. It's not my journey. I'm not responsible for that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was my experience as well. I was not allowed to wear tank tops. If I wore shorts, they had to go to my knees. Even my underwear, like I got a thong, and my mom cried when she found it. Do you know what kind of a girl wears a thong? And so like every part of my clothing was policed with that same thing. But it didn't occur to me until I was in my 20s that that was an absurd thing. I was like, you're right. I do need to watch what I wear so these guys don't, have impure thoughts and I don't lead them astray. It's all my responsibility for sure. Yeah. It took me a while to get wise to that.
Yeah. My motto is don't believe everything you think.
Yeah, I like that. That's great. Yeah.
Other questions? Ah,
Hear me okay?
Uh-huh.
Last time I did this, I messed this up. I, I walked in late and I didn't see a discussion about Mormonism. I have, I'm a full-time visitor. Somebody may know me, may not. And when I was in the military in '69 in Korea, had a couple that were Mormons. Then when I was in Lee Summers' job, Mormons have what they call a mission. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anyway, the people in Korea, the lady referred to herself as a real Mormon. That's the ones from Salt Lake City. Then when I moved back here, I saw this KCSR stuff about the Mormon groups. The original Mormons are right here where we live in Jackson County.
Yeah.
And they split. And they got these tablets, these secret tablets hidden someplace.
Mhm.
And like you said, these Mormons they're so invested, some of them are, they don't even realize everybody's making fun of them. Because when I lived in Lee Summit, right across the hallway from me, these missionaries were in this apartment complex or room right next door to me, all these boys. Now, I got a question to ask you. Are Mormons into this sexism, male and female missionaries? My experience was only males were missionaries. Is that right or wrong?
Oh no, women can go on missions as well. Um, yeah, the idea back in the day was all of the young men who were worthy would go on a mission when they're 19, and there's a lot of pressure. Like if you didn't go on a mission at 19, there was something seriously wrong, and it was like of like a dark family secret. Like why didn't he go? Like something's really wrong. So you went. And then if you were a girl who was having a hard time getting married, then you were allowed to go on a mission when you were 21. And truly, that was like she's an old maid and she's got her life is over, so let's throw her out into the mission field. Like, yes, at least she can, convert some people. Maybe she's some use to the kingdom. But now they've kind of changed that, and I think the girls can go on a mission at 19 as well. Yeah. So
And along that same line, what about acceptance of different sexualities?
no.
Not a chance, huh?
No, and they say here's their version of it. You can be gay, just don't do gay things. That's it.
Oh, that's too.
That's their policy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as I know, there are still camps and programs that are not like truly funded by the church, but are run by Mormon people to, deprogram your gayness. Yeah, and I mean, gender is still extremely important. I mean, you rarely see a woman wear pants to church. I mean, it, in fact, when I came here, I was like, yes, all the women are wearing pants. This is so awesome. It was like such a relief, I mean, and the pressure to be like, did I shave my legs? Can I go to church this morning? Like, it was a lot. Yeah. And to this day, you dress to the nines to go to church in gender appropriate clothing. And there is no place for any sort of transgender or non binary, or they can't even wrap their brains around it. I will give my mom this. My son loves to wear dresses and now has gotten into makeup, and then other days he has got a Spider-Man shirt on, and he has a fresh mohawk right now. So he's making his own rules, and she really is cool with it. Like, I know it's hard for her, but she never says anything to him about it. I can see her like, but she doesn't, and so that's really great, but that's rare. I mean, truly rare. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, does your list of credits include Crying Child #2?
It should. Number 2, number 7, number 10, number 12.
Oh, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank once again everyone for coming.
Yes.
And then our final Odyssey of the summer is next week with our very own John Maher. So he tells me he learned all kinds of great stuff in the military, and he's going to let us know what all that is. Let's thank Shanna once again.
Well, thanks, you guys. Thank you. Oh, good. I'm like sleep deprived from the baby and a little scattered, but so I appreciate your patience.
You did great.
Weren't scattered at all.
Oh, good.
Really great.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I grew up on Independence.
Oh, no.
Very similar dream. Mine coming from the church was this priesthood member who stood up and started to say,
Oh.
that I was just, I'm pretty sure it's
Yeah.